Hello everyone, and today we are exploring the forests around the proving grounds, the misty ones, the mysterious ones. They say there'll be a witch that lives nearby as we check out which Spring 3 we find. Now, first thing I want to point out, which is something I was unaware of when I bought this. I bought this on the whim on PlayAsia because the screenshots and especially the artwork looked really nice, so it convinced me to give it a shot to see what it is. But I knew nothing of this series, but obviously with a 3, and not being a modern Persona fan who has never heard of what 1 and 2, and the 2 is 2 games, thus making everything more confusing for them, I would look into the series as I played this game on live stream to find many interesting things about it. So let's get into it. So this is a port of a mobile series of the third entry specifically, but it is a Switch version of it. Now, it is a traditional turn-based affair with a active time battle system, and it's kind of in the middle of a road between a solo RPG, which would be games like Dragon Quest I and Great Greed for the original Game Boy, where you had a single main party member, and having a few interesting elements that separate that from that. Like, if you played Great Greed, you would probably immediately think, wait a minute, there are party members in Great Greed, they're just temporary, you have no control of them, and they occasionally only do something very rarely in combat. Well, this game does something a little bit more in that regard. More active, for sure. So, let's start. So, you play as a lone witch that lives in the Misty Forest, and you're trying to bring a doll to life so you can have a friend to talk to. She fails, however. The doll cannot speak in English. So, the failure. You play as a marionette witch who can give life to dolls, and this is where your party comes in place. While the game only treats you as the only targetable character in combat, you can summon dolls that fulfill roles within combat. In combat, you can have up to 3 dolls at one time, and I would basically categorize the dolls in 3 ways. You have your ones that assist you with healing and buffing. You have ones that do actual combat damage, dealing damage to one or all enemies. And then you have mounts. Mounts are a little interesting because they have 2 roles. Outside of combat, they carry the character around, and traditionally more faster than her normal speed, though there is a golem who is slow. But there's a reason for that. The golem actually is the secondary effect that mounts bring combat. You can ride your mounts into combat, and they buff your character. Mostly boosting agility and such, but the golem, for example, instead gives you great defense, and it's very useful when you're expecting a fight to be a great challenge. So the combat is a ATB system combat, as I said, so how's leveling in that? It is completely untraditional. It is no EXP system for the witch. But you could argue there's one for your dolls. The dolls level up by using vitality that you get from living creatures in combat. And there are some creatures that don't give vitality. So you need vitality to level up your dolls, but your witch specifically has a bit of a kind of a saga / training kind of thing going on. So, there are 3 ways to get your stats to go up because your witch does not level up in a traditional sense. There are items that can be consumed that will give specific stat boosts. You can get some stats boosted from combat in a saga-esque kind of manner. And then, when you're at your house, you can train. And you can train specific stats that'll give you small percentage boosts that only get higher because the stats getting higher. So say, it's a 3% boost. At a certain point, that boost is going to be more and more and more and get higher and higher because your actual stat is getting higher. And that's your 3 main ways. Now, there are a few story points that also bestow some extra stats to you. So, what the plot mainly consists of is that she is an antisocial person. She's never interacted with human life or anything. The only person she gets to interact with is her grandmother and dolls. So, the game begins with her suddenly meeting a person who wandered into the forest for some reason. And this is where her life gets turned upside down. Basically, she gets entailed into what the humans are doing outside of forest, and specifically this one human's life. It slowly goes from helping him do his task that he wants to revive his mother, who's been deathly ill, to saving the land, as these tales like to go. But basically, Witch Spring's main plot point after opening up the world to you is that in the universe of the game, there is a fight between the old gods that existed and the religion that's growing in the world. And they basically deemed the old gods should be hunted and started calling them witches, hence which led to the events of witch hunts that happen in the game. So you'll progress through the game, interacting and showing and seeing the true side of different people, some good, some bad, you know. I'm a little sucker for this kind of story because I like when like something that ain't traditionally human, things like monsters, robots, and such, or just general creatures that don't interact with people, get a like humanity kind of streak in the plot line. That's definitely what this story main draw is. That, but I found the characters really charming and everything in that. Like the idea of the combat and the story and the characters are really charming. Now, as I said, this was a port of a mobile game, and you might be like, well, that's pretty red flaggy. Well, maybe being a port is maybe more inaccurate, more of a remaster, you could say, as the graphics, comparing them, though it was a little troublesome to research through all this stuff, because this isn't like type it in and boom, you get all the straight out facts and everything. I had to actually do a little digging for some stuff and look up some playthroughs and things. This game was improved graphically, and even the artwork was improved from the original mobile version. So when you compare the overworld and the artistic direction and stuff, you could see that definitely was changed for this version. So perhaps saying more of a remastering of the game is probably more accurate. Though many menus in that, excuse me again, many of the menus and such are still the same like in the mobile version. Now, of course, in the mobile version, you likely used a touchscreen, and some of the gameplay I saw, you could see like a little, you know, ding 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 on the screen, showing that they were touching the screen. You use a controller, obviously, for the Switch. I'm not sure if you can use the touchscreen. I don't really take out my Switch for touchscreen type stuff. It does show in the case that you can play it undocked and without controllers, so it seems to indicate you can play it with the touchscreen to me. So, but what would I say about the game in general, though? It doesn't really have like a money system in it. There is money, but it's a very hardly used thing. There's only a few things. Where you find most items and generally scrounge around from battles and that to craft items and gear out of your magic pot back at your house. And that's primarily what you do for your magic. Your character is split between swordplay and magic. And you can go either balanced or all in on a specific thing. And that actually creates a stat boost to your sword and magic. Like, I went really heavy on my sword play. So, I get a 18 boost effect on my sword attacks. But there was magic too in that. But primarily, I found swordplay was much better. A lot more hit all type effects and stuff as you unlocked skills and such. Now, as a solo RPG, you might be curious, like, what can you do party-wise? So your dolls cannot be attacked. You're the only target. So when you summon them, they just do their job and such. You don't have any control of them. They target who, and they do what they want. So you summon them, you leave them to their job, and you go about your turns and that. Now, as I said, Vitality levels up your dolls, but Vitality also plays another role in combat. Having a lot of Vitality in your gym can provide a revive, restorative heal to your character in combat. So it's also useful if you find yourself in a sticky situation, which I think I only found myself in like 2 sticky situations in the game. Outside of that, it was pretty easy. This is definitely a much more casual experience. This is not something you're gonna sit down like Dragon Quest epic wise and be like, it's time to go all in for 100 hours of epicness. It's very casual, and it's very good that it's on the Switch in that sense, because it's very friendly. You can teleport to your house at any time outside of combat and that, so you can always go home, save and that, so it's pretty easy to pick up and play on the go, so it's definitely good for that, because a lot of times I have a lot of PS4 games that I say, like, I feel like this would be so much better on the mobile, on the Vita, on the Switch, going out and the go versus, well, sitting in your living room with it. But generally, when it comes to combat, for me, because, you know, I have a lot of RPGs under my my belt, you know. This is where a lot of negative things I'm likely going to have to say in the game. Well, I found the characters and the story very charming. Like, I really digged the idea, like, the marionette witch thing kind of spoke to me. It could be just me, Final Fantasy XI Taru Puppet Master, and me being all sympathetic to the whole thing, but I just found the whole concept really interesting. But the combat is, well, for me, it falters a lot, because it's really easy. Like, there's a few points that the game spikes in difficulty, but if you know your RPG stuff and you level up the dolls, like, you can break the game pretty easy. There's, like, one fight that should, for about most people, will likely prove to be a problem in the story itself. Now, there are lots of super boss stuff to keep having a challenge. Not to say there isn't stuff that challenge you. There are lots of things that freaking destroyed me bumping into them. And that also leads to another weird thing with the game. About 99% of combat, when you like go into the radius of an enemy in the wilderness, you get the option to enter combat or not. But there are a few fights that you don't, and I can tell you on one of the mountains, oh boy, there's one right there. It just starts and dead first turn. It's like ow, painful as heck. There are a few instances of that I found weird. Like, if you're gonna go in the non-story battles where you can decide to go in and out of combat, like, I don't know why you would have a few fights that you don't get that choice. Then I think I only found like 3 of them like that, but those served a little odd. Of course, having the choice to just walk away from fights also odd too. But hey, I get it's a casual type thing, so you know, I can admit to it. I just find the consistency a little odd for a few fights that aren't related to the story. Now, this being a remastering of this game, in a complete package. The mobile version was a one-time pay. It's not one of those things where they ask for more money and shit and that. So, but they did add more content into it, like with a post game and such. All that content exists on the Switch cartridge, and plus they added new content and fixed a few things in the Switch version, from my understanding. This, again, was stuff I had to research because there was limited information on WeFind. There's a lot more information on the original mobile version, but like some of the things that are different are very scarce and not a lot of information on now. But I'll go into some of that because some of that is spoilers later in the spoilers section, because I don't want to spoil, later events of things that were improved in that. Now, this game has a very chibi style, like I said. It has very nice anime artwork that shows up during the talking scenes, some of the talking, and it's important to point out the artistic direction was changed between WeFind in the mobile version, and I think they both look very nice, but I think WeFind looks much better. I've asked a few people who played Spring Witch while I live streamed it. A few people who actually have experience with the mobile versions have popped into my live stream while I was live streaming, and I actually asked for a few opinions on whether they liked the original mobile art or the new one, and I unanimously had always the new art looks better. And I personally do think it looks better. It has a lot more detail to it, and I'll try to throw some comparisons between WeFind and the original in the video here for you. But I really like the artwork. It really is the thing that drew me into trying out this game randomly, to throwing my dollar bills at PlayAsia to buy in that. And I wanted to look up who made the artwork. And something that's interestingly odd is they're not credited by name, at least. There was a controversy, basically, about the mobile version between two artists that led to a lot of drama with the Korean fans, because this is a Korean company that made this game and franchise and owns the rights to it. And apparently there was a whole bunch of drama that almost drastically affected the company's, existence. But apparently Witch Spring 3 was insanely popular in Japan and saved the company, and that's supposedly why this version was made, because it was really popular in Japan, so they made a console version to capitalize on that further. Now, this physical edition that I have is the Asian version. There was a Japanese and Asian version physically, and digitally it's supposed to be out worldwide, but there's something weird about that. I'll comment when we get into pricing and such. But market-wise, I think the main idea was to sell more to non-mobile Japanese, since the game did really well with the Japanese audience. So combat is really unbalanced to me, but everything else is really charming. Normally, I would say this would be kind of a skip, but I found it, just the whole experience, really charming. So, if you really want like a very casual RPG that you can pop in and out, I think this is definitely a game I would recommend for that. But if you're looking for a challenge, something really hard, it does have a lot of side content, like I said, and super bosses and things that you can get into as you progress through the story and do the post-game and such. There is a lot of side stuff and new stuff that isn't in the mobile version, but I didn't find what I dabbled into, like, super crazy challenging, especially with some of the later dolls that are just, they get ridiculously overpowered. Like the hero doll is like level 7 for me, and it heals way past what I even have as maximum health. It's kind of crazy. Like can I even get that much health? I would recommend this for casuals. Is this a good game for like newbies? I mean, it's definitely newbie friendly, but I would argue that doesn't teach you fundamentals very well, especially since a lot of mechanics aren't traditional based outside of combat without a normal leveling system. Gear is very minimal. There isn't a lot of different options for gear, but there is gear. There is gear for you to mess with. But it's very minimal, so I'd kind of be wishy-washy. There are definitely better things I would recommend for a newbie, but it's definitely newbie-friendly. I feel like it doesn't teach general RPG things as well, but that's a subjective opinion. But it's charming. It's just, I like the characters so much that I actually want to see 1, 2, and 4 get a Switch version. Like, I don't know. Something was so enthralling about the characters to me. Like I said, the kind of story I'm a sucker for. Now, what would I say for a price for this game? What would I say for a price for this game? I think this is a good $12.99 priced game, which, when compared to the mobile version, is a really good deal, because if you go to the mobile version, it's $4.49. It's very, very low price eventually when you're going through the mobile. And hell, the whole series is really low. Spring Witch 1 is 99 cents. Let's see, Spring Witch 2 is $1.99, and Spring Witch 4, which came out, like, I believe in December or early January of this year, is $5.49. So as you can see, like, the price is slightly increased with each one a wee little bit. And I think there's a decent amount of content with the whole game. You got the post game and everything, like I said. So I think $12.99 is a nice price for the Switch version. Now, this is where things are going to get a little iffy. So first thing, let's stick to digital first. So supposedly the worldwide release of the refined version was in December. However, I cannot find it on any English eShop. I can find it on the Japanese eShop, but I cannot find it on the EU or American eShop. When I look up about it, because the game has English, the Asian version has English in it. It's in the cartridge. So I would imagine, because I mean, Witch Spring 1 through 4 all have English versions on mobile, so I wouldn't see why they wouldn't put it on the eShop in America. But I cannot find any information on a release date. It just says worldwide in like December 20th or something. So, not sure what's going up on about that. I cannot find anything about it, sadly. So, yeah. Now, most of us in our little collective here are mostly into actually owning our games, however. So, the physical edition. Oh. Now, PlayAsia says both the Asian and Japanese version have English in them. They have Japanese and Korean voice acting. To my understanding, none of the mobile versions have voice acting. So this is the first time any voice acting has supposedly been in the franchise, let alone Witch Spring 3. Now, I have the Asian version, so I can't speak for the Japanese version, but if you get the game, you get, if you pre-ordered it, you get the early bird special, which I would imagine once those are all gone, you'll just get the standard game. The PlayAsia site tells you nothing about these extras, so I don't know if they still have them or not, but besides getting the game, you get a nice slipcover, a soundtrack that has 30 tracks on it, and what I think is probably my favorite item, how many pages? 77-page art book that has all the new artwork and lots of information that I sadly can't read, and I don't even know what language the text that's in the book is in. I don't know if it's Korean, Chinese, Japanese, mixture, You know, they have different alphabets and stuff, and like, I don't know what particular language it's in, but it has a lot of artwork from We Find. Sadly, as far as I can tell, there's no artwork from the original mobile version, which is a little bit of a shame, but I still like the art book. It's definitely the nice selling point to me. But what is the price? You're probably like, stop delaying getting to the price. So if you want this physical version, whether it be the Japanese or the Asian version, you're looking at $39.99. Yeah, that's quite a lot. Now, I always say, as a standard, usually for a physical version, you should at least expect $19.99 as like a bare minimum for a brand new physical game. And I think that's fair for most people to expect. Though $40 is kind of hard to recommend this game. It's again very charming. If you like what you see, then you might be interested in keeping an eye to see if maybe you can get it cheaper, or if you have expendable money, you can just get it. But for a physical version, I do feel like $20 would have been a more fair price. Like I said, they put some extras in here. The art book is very nice in that, and I'm sure the idea was the extras to make you feel not as gyptish. I mean, they did a good job, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of hard to like, that price point with the completely unbalanced combat just doesn't rub me the right way. And if you're hoping to get a cheaper version on like eBay or something currently, that is a terrible idea, because even... Ooh, I'm having a lot of hiccups today. Even the English version is going for more than what it is on PlayAsia. Like, the cheapest one I see here is $44, $48 on eBay and such, which again is $39.99 on PlayAsia. So, and a lot of these Asian English releases don't usually go down in price when they're sold out. They usually go up. So it's unlikely that you're going to likely find a cheaper price once it's sold out. It is likely to go up more. No guarantees, obviously. We don't know because, well, it's not sold out. It is tough to really recommend the physical version for $40. It's definitely going to be something that's ultimately up to your choice. But I did enjoy the game enough to do a lot of research into the series and about stuff related to it, which led to the rabbit hole of the art, like how they didn't name drop the person who we did the art for We Find because of a controversy that happened with the original artists and such, and a lot of nice little tidbit things of interest for the storyline. But that is what I think of Which Spring We Find. If you feel like you have any other additional questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. And let's go into spoilers then, shall we? Spoilers. So, something I think is important to do, if you're going into this never playing Witch Spring 1 and 2, I think it's important to understand that Witch Spring 1, 2, and 3 are all happening within the, like, same time period. Many of the events cross over before and after to things that are happening in the other games. Now, the end of Witch Spring 3 happens past the events of Witch Spring 1 and 2, but there are things that happen in Witch Spring 3 that also correlate to events that happen in Witch Spring 1 and 2. So they're all happening kind of at the same time at different events relatively to each other, if you get what I mean now. So, plot-wise, I mean, essentially, it's a religion against the older beliefs of the world, and they're trying to hunt down the gods, which are the witches. You know, early on, I was a little confused because, you know, some people would call her a god, and others would call her witch. And basically the religion convinced people to start calling them witches, and not everyone's a believer of the religion in this world in that sense of that. So that leads to a bunch of these witch hunts that are happening throughout the story of 1 through 3. That there was a witch hunt. Now, Witch Spring 4, oddly enough, does not take place at the same time period. It takes place after the witch hunt, so it's actually in its own little it's not sharing the events happening at the same time. The witch hunts are over in Spring 4, so I do have to appreciate a lot of twists that happen in the story of Witch Spring 3, because a lot, like, you play it, you know, it's like this was originally a mobile game, and the plot seems really basic, like nothing too shocking, but there were a few things I wasn't expecting that actually shocked me, mainly about how the end unfolded, but I was also disappointed a little. Because, you know, you're told how this religion is leading to them all trying to hunt down these gods and kill them and shit. And you actually only get to see the Pope one time, Willie, and never again, because he's the boss of, I believe, the Pope was the boss of Witch Spring 1, and then the main person who orchestrated all the events that happened in the 3 games was the boss of 2, I believe. Or it might have been the other way around. One of the 2 ways. But those 2 figureheads, and you don't even get to see the one who orchestrated everything in Witch Spring 3. So, those 2 get killed off screen in the other 2 games. And you have to deal with the puppeteered, or the puppets of the mastermind in 3. Which, you know, you spend a whole time thinking he was really evil and selfish, and it kind of just pulls the rug under you that the father figure was really just being ultimately used and conned and lied to, and it just it feels like a last minute moment to try and make you feel sympathy for him in a way, and I can feel bad for him being used and shit, but he did some pretty terrible shit all the same too, so it doesn't ultimately redeem him, but it does make me feel a bit sad for him that he went down that path because of being lied to in a way. It's just a charming little story that I liked it. The post game, which, like I said, was an update for the mobile version originally. The post game fucking was really the biggest surprise, in my opinion, finding out that one of your friends was not necessarily a friend much. Now, interestingly, he died in my game, but apparently, if you do a certain side quest before the end of the game, you can actually have a different scene where he doesn't get killed, and he actually survives and makes up with everyone, makes up and be like, I was stupid and shit and that, like, but I never expected him to fucking fake everything and then try to sacrifice the main character into reviving one of the springs. Like, I understand what he was doing, but, like, I didn't expect him to fucking do that. Like, that was just out of left field where they were using the dragons and shit. Like, didn't expect that. But, that leads to something else, though. There were all different paths in the game. I went down what's referred to as the light path, but apparently there is a true path, a dark path, and like I said, the fate of one of the characters in the post-game is dependent on a side quest you do during the main game. So the light path is just all pure goody-good. True ending path is where you go a little into the dark, but you return back to the good path. And then the bad endings where you just go pure evil. And there's only one choice that leads to the... One choice that is the forced change in the path, and then the second choice will be whether you go back to the light path or just continue into the dark path. The dark path also ends on a bad note, and you don't actually have like you go all the way to the end of the story or anything. It just has its own dark, sad little ending and that. So there's a few different paths and stuff, and from what I understand, that's not a thing really in 1 and 2 of Witch Spring. So that was something new to Witch Spring 3. It's both expected and unexpected story, but I've still found it charming all the same. So I definitely would recommend checking out the game. On I visually I definitely recommend the Wii Fine version. Not that Witch Spring 3 on the mobile looks terrible, but like when you look at how the overworld looks, like the overworld has kind of a chess look on like the mobile version. So but those are my thoughts of Witch Spring 3 We Find. It is a remastering of the third game on the Switch. I really enjoyed the charm of the characters' story, the artwork, and there's even a few good tracks in the game that I really actually liked. Some are stereotypical, but there were a few like the more serious moment kind of themes that actually rung very nice to me. I really liked the themes of the game, and the marionette angle is really nice. Now, I don't know how Witch Spring 4 plays out in combat, whether it, like, does another marionette witch or a different witch entirely, because Witch Spring 1 and 2, you used monsters, apparently, instead of marionettes. But it still has, essentially, a minion system, so I don't know what Witch Spring 4 does. What I would love to see more if they did a sequel, which, well, technically they did do a sequel, but I haven't played that. I do hope it gets a refined version. Like, I really would like to see, like, since Witch Spring 1 and 2 are really cheap, I'm assuming they're very short, I'd probably like to see a bundle of, like, Witch Spring 1 and 2. Ooh, no hiccup. Ooh, excuse me. I'd like to see, like, a bundle of Witch Spring 1 and 2, like maybe as a refined edition, and then Witch Spring 4 as a refined edition. But, that's just me being hopeful in that. I don't know. I just really got dragged into the world. It's certainly not perfect by any means, but if you feel like the price tag is worth it, that I would check it out, though. Like, I just found it enthralling, but it's definitely not something to go into looking for a deep RPG by any means. But those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on Witch Spring 3 We Find. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below or leave me a message on Twitch. And if you feel like you learned anything interesting in this, feel free to leave a like. And if you feel like you learned nothing at all, feel free to leave a like. Feel free to leave a dislike, guilt-free. And until next time, be careful out there in the forest. You never know when you might run into a doll that might not be quite as asleep as you thought.